and here we go.
There's the deluge. Here's ignition.
Doubling up.
Did it just do a Kerbal?
Back to the moon and beyond.
Put that in the big bag, you know.
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, this sure looks like a perfect flow.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
We did have an observation.
Equalization.
343 unfolds to go.
It's orange.
Water towers can fly!
Bingo! Right in the center. Where's Jacqueline? There it is!
That was surreal.
That's not what we want to see.
No!
Oh my God.
Yikes. You bet. Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Hello everybody and welcome to the stream. I'm not 100% sure why Jay cut to me because Soy is hosting this one, but my name's Ryan Caton. Thank you very much for joining us. We are live for the Crew-11 undocking, which is going to be taking place in a few minutes time. But with that, very subtly, we're going to cut to Sawyer.
Very subtle indeed. So yes, as you can tell, Ryan Caton will be joining me here today for this live undocking stream here at NSF. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be the actual host for this event today. So this is going to be quite interesting. As we've talked about this, the return of Crew-11 and Crew Dragon Endeavour to Earth following approximately 5 months aboard the ISS, 1 month earlier of a return than was originally planned due to a medical situation that occurred aboard the International Space Station. So far, before we went live, the hatch has been closed between the International Space Station and Crew Dragon Endeavour, and preparations are currently underway for the undocking. And we'll talk about what is involved with that and the schedule going forward. But of course, if you have any questions, you can tag us at NASASpaceflight or at NSF. We will do our best to answer as many of them as we can regarding the situation, regarding the procedures, what's going to happen with undocking and splashdown, and anything along those lines. So Ryan, for those who might just kind of be tuning in or kind of forgotten a little bit of the sequence of how we got here, do you mind kind of just running through how we got to today's undocking?
So if we rewind the clock about a week or so ago, we had a call on the space to ground loops from mission specialist Camille Yui calling for a PMC or private medical conference. And that was kind of our first indication that something was happening on board the International Space Station. We then got a couple of press communications from NASA following that, which indicated that there was a medical event which happened on board the space station and that the crew member involved was stable. But of course, for medical privacy reasons, NASA isn't going to be disclosing which crew member is involved or what exactly happened or anything like that. What we did hear, though, from the NASA doctor in the press conference was that the medical incident had nothing to do with a spacewalk, which was being prepared for at the time, or general space station operations. So this medical event had nothing to do with either of those things. We then had the press conference I just mentioned, where NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman announced that they were bringing forward the return of Crew-11, but it wasn't an emergent situation, so they didn't have to bring the crew member home as soon as possible. They could wait a little bit and they could conduct a standard return procedure, which is what they have spent the last week or so doing. So on Monday, there was a change of command ceremony on board the International Space Station, where Mike Fink, who was commanding the space station, handed over those responsibilities to Sergei Kutsverchkov, a cosmonaut from Roscosmos, who is now commanding the ISS for the foreseeable future. And then over the last few days, the Crew-11 crew have been basically packing up their cargo, doing some final scientific experiments, packing personal belongings, and getting ready to depart the space station, which is going to be coming up in a few minutes' time. Just a couple of hours ago, the hatch was closed on Crew Dragon, and all of the astronauts are suited and booted and ready to go.
I like that, suited and booted. But yeah, we saw the crew. They appeared to be okay from what we could see. There was nothing obvious. And of course, as you pointed out, they are not saying who it was that had this medical situation because of patient privacy reasons. Also not what the extent of the either injury or illness or whatever it was is, other than it was quote-unquote serious, per Jared Isaacman in the original press conference, NASA administrator, and that they decided that the safest thing to do would be to bring the crew back early. Obviously, it wasn't super critical because they could have been back in a matter of hours. Instead, they chose to take the couple of days to get to the point where we are today with the undocking and then shortly thereafter the splashdown. And again, that will happen about 8 hours or so from now is when we'll start to see that procedure happen. And in less than 12 hours, the crew should be back down on Earth in their capsule floating in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of California, where recovery ship Shannon will be waiting for them along with a recovery helicopter. Once they do splash down, there are always hospitals on standby, no matter the crew, no matter the mission, no matter the extent of their time there in space, that are ready for them just in case they need to be flown to a nearby hospital. So there are also flight surgeons that have been monitoring them on the ground, and an entire medical team that will greet the entire crew once they return aboard Shannon to check them out and make sure they're okay after so much time spent in space. Let's see here. So Leonard is asking, how long will this take today? Ryan, about how long does the undocking take?
Well, the undocking itself is not an incredibly, extended procedure, but there are a lot of things that happen before the undocking and after the undocking. So, of course, the hatch closed a little while ago at this point, and the astronauts will be running through checklists with SpaceX teams to prepare the vehicle for that undocking. We're expecting at about 1/4 the top of the hour for the undock command to actually be sent. But the undocking doesn't happen straight away. It happens about 5 minutes later. So we are expecting the actual physical separation of the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station to take place at 20 minutes past the hour, which is going to be in about 40 minutes time from now. And then after that initial undocking procedure, there's going to be a series of departure burns, numbered 0 through 3, very helpfully. So there'll be the first departure burn just as they undock to get away from the space station. There'll be 3 more to prepare them for their final burn, which will be the deorbit burn, of course, and that will actually reduce the perigee or lowest part of Dragon's orbit to be low enough so that the capsule will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and, of course, fall back to the ground, or the ocean rather, and then splash down under parachute.
Yeah, and for the actual procedure itself, basically, as you pointed out, there's the hatch closure. They take care of everything there. There are a bunch of umbilicals that connect Crew Dragon to the International Space Station because Crew Dragon Endeavour, it has its own life support and CO2 scrubber, and it has its own electricity capability. But when you have a giant orbiting laboratory with stronger capabilities, you want to hack into that. Well, not hack into, tap into that, we'll say. So they typically use the space station CO2 scrubbers, space station power, things like that. So before they undock, they of course need to disconnect all of those connections, so those will retract away. Then Crew Dragon is hard clamped to the space station. So there are different hooks in addition to latches holding things into place. So with that hard capture, what will happen is the hooks will release, and then we'll go into what is known as the soft capture mode. So it will kind of take about 5 minutes for all of those to unhook and everything to dampen out. And then once it does, that is when those final latches will release. And that is when we will see the first burn that you were talking about for Crew Dragon to back away from the International Space Station. Very likely we will also see the thrusters on board, the Draco thrusters firing, which is expected to kind of maintain its attitude as it backs away from the International Space Station. And the main thing is there is 2 sort of imaginary ellipsoids that there are around the International Space Station. There's the keep out zone, and then there's the approach ellipsoid. So once they are outside of that, then they will be sort of away from the ISS. Their main thing is to be in a way that if something were to happen during that undocking, they would still be able to drift away and not crash back in to the International Space Station. And once they do that and they get far enough away from the International Space Station, they'll do a couple more burns, and that is also when communications will switch over. Because right now they've been using one joint communications loop called space to ground. And in fact, we kind of heard that when they were making that first call for that personal medical conference was on space to ground 3 or 4. So once they do that, they'll get out of the big loop and go to their own individual communications. The ISS will stay on their loops, and then Dragon will move on to its loops before eventually continuing to discuss with their control center down in Hawthorne, California. Let's get to some of your other questions here. GeoHound saying, as the ISS orbits the Earth several times per day, how do they actually measure time on the station? So as we're talking about these deorbit times, we're primarily using Eastern time, but what do they use on ISS, Ryan?
Well, as it doesn't have a fixed time zone, it travels across every time zone. They have picked the International Time Zone, which is Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC. That is I don't think it's really a time zone, it's more of a time standard. And it is based on Greenwich Mean Time, or GMT, and it's what all the time zones in the world are pegged to. So, for example, the Eastern Time is UTC -5, it's 5 hours behind. If you are on Paris time, it's UTC +1, you're an hour ahead. And there are various time zones around the world, of course. So that is the time zone utilized on board the International Space Station. It's also very helpful that it's essentially smack bang in the middle of Central Time, where the Johnson Space Center is, where the US crew operations are based, and Moscow Time, which is where the Russian crew operations are based. So you have mission control in Houston, mission control in Moscow, and then you basically go right in between those two time zones and you have UTC. So it's a nice middle ground for both the American and Russian teams to work together, because of course the International Space Station is made up of the US and Russian orbital segments.
Exactly, and you can see actually right now, I believe that is a pinpoint of where the ISS is as we speak. So it is currently over Europe there right now. I'm trying to see which country. I have a smaller screen that I'm trying to look at.
I believe it is 400 kilometers roughly over Germany right now.
Here we go. Wave to Adrian. So yeah, that is where they're currently going. Of course, all of this will allow them to eventually have that trajectory where they will do a couple of burns and then deorbit and eventually splash down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of California. There are a couple of different splashdown sites that they have, and they choose which one based off of the weather conditions and the direction that Crew Dragon is coming in from. Regardless, Shannon is the recovery ship that will be there to recover them out of the water, which is a cool procedure. And we will be live on a separate stream coming up for that actual splashdown procedure, where they'll come down under the parachutes and then they'll attach some special reefing cables to it, back Shannon up to it, have a little arm that comes down, crews will hook it up, and then it kind of lifts it out of the water onto a little donut on the deck. It's really cool. Of course, couple questions about what this means for the crew that's up there now. James Atkinson asking, how long will space be down to 6 people in space total? I guess they're also counting the 3 people that are on China's space station Tiangong and the 3 that will be aboard the ISS. And are there any risks that could drop lower before the next crew flies to the ISS? Because the ISS will have, as mentioned, the 3 people on board. You have the entire crew of the Soyuz MS-28. You have 2 different Sergeys. You've got Sergei Mikheyev and Sergei Kuzferkov, and then you have NASA astronaut Chris Williams. One of the concerns is that, well, it's only been down to 3 people, and this is the first time we've seen it down to 3 people in well over a decade. But Crew 12, another question relating to that was, where are they planning on moving Crew 12 to the left? So where are we at with that, Ryan?
Yep. It's not unprecedented, though. The space station has flown with a crew of 3 people many times before in its 25-year history, so I personally wouldn't really worry about it. Of course, there are contingencies where if, for any reason, Soyuz MS-28 has to depart, the station would have to fly autonomously by itself under the control of the ground. It wouldn't be able to fly with crew on board because there wouldn't be anyone there to operate it. So those are there are contingencies which account for that, which NASA has on the backup just in case they need them. But if anything, the seat barter agreement NASA has with Russia to allow Russians to fly on US vehicles and Americans to fly on Soyuz, this is a perfect example of why that is a brilliant idea, because Crew-11 has to come home early. But Soyuz MS-28 has a NASA crew member on board, which means there is still an American on board the space station to operate the American side of the space station. So I think that's just a great example of that collaboration, which is still taking place amongst the geopolitical difficulties right now between the West and Russia. On Crew-12 specifically, fingers crossed, it's only going to be 4 weeks or so before Crew-12 are able to dock to the space station, and if NASA, SpaceX and international teams are able to bring that date ever so slightly forward, that would also be a benefit, of course. But at the end of the day, just over 4 weeks flying with 3 people, you know, the space station is perfectly capable of doing that. But we haven't heard anything on whether Crew-12 is going to be moved yet. But that is a desire which has been stated by NASA officials. So if they can do it, they will. If they can't do it, it's no big deal. It's not something we need to be worrying about.
Exactly. And again, we bring up the fact that they have already moved Crew-12 sooner than originally planned, although that was for the international, or for the Artemis mission, to allow them to have time to give more opportunities for Artemis 2 to launch. So as of right now, Crew-12 still remains, I believe, no earlier than February 15th currently, although again, I guess in this case, it could be earlier. So we'll say approximately February 15th.
Yeah, we can't really use no earlier than in this context. It's really difficult to know what to say, because no earlier than, wait, no, it might actually be earlier, but we don't know.
Currently targeting. Let's go with that.
That's the best language, yeah.
Oh boy. So that's where we're at with that. Michael asking, if this had been a level 10 emergency, how long would it take the astronauts to get off the ISS? One thing they had stated is, if needed, they had the capability to bring the crew back within a matter of hours. Typically, I believe they said about 3-ish hours in a worst case scenario. They definitely have accelerated ways to be able to get the crew back down. And in fact, when it comes to the deorbit, we've seen times where they're only in their capsule for 6 or 8 hours prior to re-entry. We've also seen times where it's been 22 or 23 hours that they've been in their capsule prior to re-entry. A lot of it has to do with orbital mechanics, with the type of burns that they do, and the optimal time and location to get to those splashdown zones. This one seems to be kind of in the middle, as we were talking about. I believe it's about 11 or 12 hours that they'll be in the capsule total between the actual undocking and then splashing down in the Pacific. So it could have been 3 hours. They have emergency and contingency plans for that exact reason, of ways to be able to get out there, to get the crew and bring them back in case of emergency. They practice for it. They train for it all the time. We've seen crews getting ready for this when they were still at Port Canaveral here as their base. They would be inside the port taking out the fast boats, which are these little small boats they have that zip out to the capsule and to the crew ahead of time. Initial checks on them, do sniffs of the vehicle for any leaking gases, and get the lines all rigged for them to be able to lift the capsule up. They do that practice all the time. In fact, when they first got word of the medical situation aboard the ISS, we happened to see that those fast boats had been deployed in the port of Long Beach, and we're doing some practice there as well. So they're always ready for it, they're always prepared for it, and they have something on standby in the event that is needed. Let me thank a couple of people here before we move on to the next question. Tommy Time, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Spike, thank you as well for becoming a PadRat member. And Chromatic gifting a Red Team membership. Thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate that a lot. Let's see here. Here's one from Mr. Gamer IO asking, is there any reoccurring first thing astronauts have to do after returning to the ground? I guess, Ryan, can you kind of walk through what happens as soon as they splash down? What's next for the crew?
So the first thing is, well, it's not really something that the crew has to do, but of course, as you were explaining earlier, Sawyer, the Dragon capsule is lifted up and placed onto the recovery vessel. They then, the teams on board the recovery vessel then open up the hatch, and then one of the people from that team will poke their head in, say hello to everybody, make sure that everybody is all right. And once that has been established, they will then assist the crew out of the Dragon. And typically for these longer duration missions, we will see the crew members being placed onto a stretcher and then rolled off to a medical room, which is available on the ship. And there they will be overviewed and checked out by doctors and other medical professionals to make sure that they are indeed okay. And if all is green and everything looks good, they'll board a helicopter on board of Shannon, and then they will be flown back to dry land. If some things aren't looking okay, then they will be taken to a medical facility on land, and that has happened before with SpaceX Crew Dragon recoveries. And those things are on standby. Those things are perfectly normal procedures, and they are there for redundant purposes to make sure that everybody is okay. Space is a very hostile environment. It's not something which the human body was built for. We're designed for 1G. We're not designed for 0G. We're not designed to be floating under weightlessness for months at a time. So, this is a very difficult environment to operate in. And, at the end of the day, astronauts train like athletes because they have to try and keep up their bone density and their muscle strength whilst they don't have anything to push against on.
Exactly. You can see here, this was the procedure after Crew 10, which was the previous Crew Dragon mission, to the International Space Station. So you can see there how they rig it up, and then it gets lifted up and then placed on top of that little donut, which then is on tracks and slides back to allow the crew to get off. And as you pointed out, if everything is green, then it's good. But if the crew is green, apparently it is very common for people to lose their lunch as soon as they get back onto ground from some of the people I've spoken to. So they may be a little green in the face too.
Yeah, we've seen before, most recently with the Soyuz return, where, for example, Don Pettit, when he came back a few months ago, sometimes crew members are whisked off to the tents that they have there set up in Kazakhstan just for some additional medical checkouts and maybe some medical privacy, because, coming back from 0G, spending 6 months or so, half a year in weightlessness, and then coming back to, full-on gravity on the surface of the Earth, that can do some weird things to the human body sometimes.
Yeah, oh, and when asked about it afterwards, because people were saying he looked off, he said, yeah, I felt terrible. But he was fine within a couple of days after that. But you mentioned an interesting thing of like training like an athlete. That's one thing that sometimes people forget, is the fact that the crew, as you pointed out, for being so long in there, there are muscles and bones that they would normally use here on Earth and that get gravity to use them that don't get used in space, so they kind of start to atrophy or get weaker, and you start to lose some bone density since, again, you're not putting weight on it. So what they actually do is they have to do approximately 2 hours of exercise every day. So they have treadmills that they run on, they have resistance machines that will kind of simulate gravity for them so that they can keep those muscles working and those bones working that otherwise they wouldn't. So they spend hours a day just on keeping their body up so that they lose less bone mass, because they still do lose some regardless. And the other thing when people come back of, oh man, why do they feel so terrible? Well, a couple of things is that if you ever notice the astronauts' heads kind of look puffy in space, that's because gravity normally helps the fluid go all the way down towards your feet. When you're in space, and microgravity isn't a thing, a lot of the fluid kind of starts to float up around your head and you get a big head in space. And that is something that is expected, and it's a phenomenon they're aware of. It actually affects a lot of people's sinuses and ability to taste while they're in space. Also, you grow a couple of inches while you're in space because your spine is compressed because of gravity. So once you're in that weightless or microgravity environment, your spine stretches out by 1 or 2 inches. At first, apparently, it can cause some back pain, but once you get used to it, your body's okay. Until then, all of a sudden, you are forced to 2 to 3 times the force of gravity against you on re-entry, and then your back is recompressed, which can lead to a lot of pain as well when astronauts return. And you can see some of the fitness that they have to do aboard the ISS. This was a video from the European Space Agency on some of the different machines that they have for the resistance, the treadmill. In fact, Suni Williams at one point ran an entire marathon aboard a treadmill while she was on the ISS. She ran the Boston Marathon from space while it was ongoing on the Earth. But yeah, this is what they have to do to stay fit.
A kind of humorous anecdote from the From 2 mission, well, I can't say earlier this year anymore, it's 2026, but from kind of, springtime last year, is that in the first interview that we were very grateful to have the entire crew on, and Janneke Mikkelsen from that mission actually said that at the beginning of the re-entry process, she lifted her arm up kind of off of the armrest in Crew-11 and was like, oh, this kind of feels like 1G, and then looked up at the G meter on the displays, and it was actually reading something like 0.4G. So that just goes to show how much that that was like not even a week in space, right? And that was already making an impact like that on the crew. So that just goes to show, imagine spending 6 months in space, right? That's a big difference.
How embarrassing, you're wearing the same shirt. But yeah, so it's something that they have to deal with. And I know the other question that I saw, so the original question said, what's something they love to do afterwards? From what I've heard, the main thing is seeing their family again, but when they first get off, real food as well. If their stomach can tolerate it, and they're feeling okay after that re-entry and the G-forces and all the bobbing in the ocean, depending on the sea state, yeah, they're happy to have normal food again. Fresh fruits and things are very rare to come by on the ISS because they don't last, so everything is usually freeze-dried or pre-prepared. And so it's nice to be able to get those fresh fruits and vegetables and salads and bananas and oranges and things like that. Finally being able to taste them and not having to wait for that resupply vehicle to bring them up and hope that they're still fresh after the 2 to 3 days in transit. Speaking of in transit, you can see there is the ISS currently around the Indian Ocean and heading, in fact, on its way over towards India right now. And we are expecting, I believe, about 15 to 20 minutes or so from now, we should begin to see that undocking process, starting with the hard dock becoming a soft dock, so releasing some of those hooks that are holding it in place. And then 5 minutes later or so, we will see those latches release. You'll also notice that happening because the two of them are very tightly sealed together. In fact, it was one of the things that you're used to seeing in the old times is they will dock and then they kind of close into each other. Shuttle actually had a retraction ring on its docking adapter, and it's kind of similar with the IDA that they use, which is the International Docking Adapter. So we'll see that hopefully. Right now we won't see it, of course, because they are currently in a loss of signal.
Crew monitoring of ACS moding for Dragon departure. Undock sequence start time is still 22:15 GMT.
Copy.
And you hear that there.
Of monitoring ACS moding, 22:15 is the undock time. I'll get that in work.
Good readback.
That other voice you're hearing is Chris Williams aboard the International Space Station, because in addition to having to prepare Dragon for it, they also have to prepare the ISS for it. Because keep in mind, there is still going to be force against the International Space Station as it undocks, kind of like a small spring force. So they want to make sure that the space station is in an attitude and in a control where it's not going to start spinning out of control or cause issues with the control moment gyros. So they have to prepare on the ISS side as much as they do on the Dragon side. You know, the whole laws of gravity, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Same is true in space. So we'll hopefully hear those callouts. We should be getting video back soon, but as I was mentioning, they are currently in what's called LOS, or loss of signal. There are different parts on the trajectory where they are out of range of some of these ground stations that allow for the video to come down, which is on a different type of band. Usually it's KU band that we get the videos from. Let's see here. Kit asking, are G-related issues the most common health problem for astronauts in microgravity? Ryan, we talked a little bit about it from a paper that was found, kind of about all the different medications and things they have aboard the ISS and different drugs, and it talked about some of the things that they deal with on there.
Yeah, I would say that the G-related issues might be the most famous issues because it's something that's talked about quite often. You know, the whole point of being in space is kind of being weightless and being in zero G. So, you know, that's probably the one of the problems which astronauts are most commonly asked about, just because it's what the most people know about, right? And, you know, space adaptation syndrome is a very real thing, and there is no way to predict how somebody is going to react to the space environment when they're on Earth, because it's not related to seasickness or motion sickness or anything like that. It can be You can be a perfect flyer and a perfect sailor on Earth and deal horrifically to the situation of zero G, or you could be a terrible flyer on Earth and deal with space like it's just another Tuesday. So I would say that G-related health problems are probably the most well-known and most talked about health issues when it comes to space. Sawyer, I don't know if you have any more details on that document that we were looking at the other day.
Yeah, they did specify, they're correcting themselves, that they meant GI, as in gastrointestinal as well. But yeah, I mean, as we've talked about from some of the past documents we've seen is obviously injuries from spacesuits with all the pressurization in them. So injury to body parts, fingernails coming loose, things like that. We've seen skin, bacterial, and viral infections because, spoiler alert, the International Space Station is kind of gross. You haven't been able to air it out for 25 years. So there's different types of bacteria and things that are growing on the walls, etc. So stuff like that. It's a lot of minor things. And there's still plenty of medical issues that occur. There are people who have had small burns, that have had muscle issues, that have had skin issues, but they do have a medical kit aboard the ISS for them to be able to deal with it. And I guess GI in that case, you do have the space adaptation sickness, which usually messes more with your ability to hold down fluids in your stomach coming up. But there was actually a op-ed piece that was written by former astronaut Clay Anderson in the Washington Post just the other day, where he did address that while he was aboard the ISS, he did have to deal with a gastrointestinal issue the other direction as well, and said it was not very fun. If you can find a copy that isn't paywall, it's a very interesting read. We're now getting official word that on the SpaceX side of things, SpaceX is go for the undock. Of course, there is the mission control in Houston. That is for all things International Space Station. You also have SpaceX's Mission Control Center for Crew Dragon, which is located at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. So right now, no further issues are being reported with the crew member. Again, we don't know what exactly the issue was with that crew member. We don't know which crew member it was. But what are they doing right now, Ryan?
Well, right now they are going to be going through the checklists and going through all the details, preparing the vehicle for that undocking procedure, which is just taking a look at the clock, going to be starting in approximately 7 minutes time. Now, I don't want to speculate on the medical condition or the specific crew member, but I do have to say, over the course of the change in command ceremony and the hatch closure earlier today, you know, if you didn't know that there was a medical event on board the space station last week, I honestly don't think you'd be able to tell that there was, because the crew are acting in such a professional way, which you would expect from a NASA crew, right? But they're acting in such a calm and collected and professional way that, you know, it just seems like any other crew undock that we've seen. So you know, honestly, I think big props to the crew, because whoever has been dealing with these medical issues, they at least visually appear to be handling it, you know, very well, considering that they're still able to, essentially face the world's media and conduct those, you know, historic ceremonies and the like.
Exactly. And I mean, again, I think part of it is the fact that it was, as they called it, a non-emergent issue. So it wasn't anything super severe that was, you know, absolutely life-threatening or horrendous, or it was obvious enough that something needed to happen. This was more, it seemed like, out of extra caution in the fact that they only have limited resources aboard the ISS of what they can use to diagnose and analyze people, as opposed to the full suite of instruments that you would have in a hospital. So the best thing is to be able to bring them back down and then use all of those instruments, access to all the different medications, the tools, diagnostics, everything like that, and be able to actually get hands-on with the patient rather than relying on the crew aboard. Although all of the crews are trained on medical emergencies and medical procedures aboard the ISS. They know what's in their emergency med kits, everything like that. So they are prepared for it, they are trained for it, and they are ready in case needed. This being one of the few times where we've actually heard of it being needed, and of course the first time in ISS history that this has required a crew to return back to Earth because of a medical reason. But Ryan, you were doing a video for Breaking Space, which is another channel that we have here. This isn't the only time it's happened, though.
No, it is not. And it's actually pretty incredible that it's taken 25 years for this to happen, because the NASA prediction models state that technically a medical emergency statistically should take place every 3 years on board the International Space Station. So it's pretty impressive. They've gone 25, and this is the first time they've had to do it. And it's not an emergent situation either. This is just a precautionary measure. But there have been 2 or 3 medical deorbits, depending on how you classify it, and also depending on if historic Soviet reporting is 100% accurate, which it isn't always. But there have been situations, I believe, twice on board the old Salyut space stations, and once on board the Mir space station. So one of the problems that happened before is that a cosmonaut withheld medical information about a enlarged prostate, which then became a much worse situation when they reached space, and they tried to treat it with medication on board the Salyut station, but it wasn't doing the job, so they actually had to end the mission early. It was going to be a long duration mission, but it only ended up lasting, I believe, just over a month. So they had to bring that crew back and close that mission much earlier than Crew-11 had to close. Just as one of those examples there. And I'm sure the YouTube mods will be linking that video in the chat. So if you want to learn about all of the other wonderful medical incidents that have taken place in space, that video is available for you over on the Breaking Space channel.
Exactly. Definitely go check that out. And you can see there we have a look inside Mission Control Center, the ISS Control Center specifically, located at the Johnson Space Center just outside Houston, Texas. And they're proceeding to monitor everything on board and monitor everything with both the ISS and the undocking procedures here. So far everything proceeding, and we should be getting that undocking happening less than 10 minutes from now. As for the whole procedure, again, kind of just to go over what happens during the actual undocking itself, it starts with a sort of soft undocking to begin with. So the hatch, as we mentioned, is already closed. They're working on the pressurization inside that sort of hatch to go with it. So once they do all of that, the umbilicals that has supplied power and has linked to the air supply system aboard the ISS, those retract and then they disconnect. And then there are 12 hooks that are currently around the Crew Dragon International Docking Adapter. Those will release, and then it becomes a soft capture state. Normally it goes soft capture to hard capture on docking. For undocking, it goes hard capture to soft capture. And then after it gets to that point, which is about 5 minutes or so, then there are latches that will release, and or hooks that will release, and at that point it will move away from the International Space Station, and that will have its first sort of burn to move it away. That is called burn 0. As it does that, we will likely see the Draco thrusters firing to help keep it oriented and in its proper trajectory, and then that's followed shortly thereafter by departure burn 1. So that's meant to increase the velocity of Dragon moving away from the ISS, increasing the distance and getting it out of that keep-out sphere, so to speak. So an area that would move it away from the ISS, that if something were to go wrong, it would not come back in and cause any damage to the space station itself. Of course, there is another burn after that, departure burn 2, once it is farther away and sort of outside that sphere. And then there will, of course, be more smaller burns and other procedures as needed to orient Dragon for its re-entry later tonight, with splashdown hopefully occurring around 3:50 a.m. Eastern Time. So that's kind of what we can expect at this point going forward today. And yes, as mentioned, still targeting splashdown at 3:41 a.m. Eastern Time. Boy, let's see here. Brittany Grace asking, how long will it take for the capsule to get to Earth? There's kind of your timing on that. And Ryan, how exactly does that work once they do the undocking and those kind of undock burns? From what kind of goes on between then and that splashdown?
So it's a process of kind of refining Dragon's orbit to be basically get Dragon's orbit to be far away from the International Space Station and put it on the correct trajectory to get to their desired landing spot. So there's a series of 4, they call them departure burns. Helpfully, it's numbered 0 to 3. So there's departure burn 0, which starts immediately following the undocking of the station. of Dragon from the station. Then there are 3 other departure burns, and those will happen pretty much within a couple of hours after undocking. And then there's a little bit of a coast phase, and then there is the deorbit burn, which takes place with the Draco thrusters at the front of Dragon, and those are then pointing, technically they're pointing upwards, so they kind of have to reverse Dragon, if that makes sense, so they can burn retrograde or backwards in order to reduce their periapsis, or lowest point of their orbit. Once that then happens, they can close the nose cone of the Dragon, because they no longer need to use those Draco thrusters, which are at the front of the capsule, and then they'll spin the capsule around so it's facing the correct way for re-entry, and they will ditch the trunk, which is the unpressurized back portion of Dragon that sometimes carries extra cargo. For example, rollout solar arrays, which have launched on Dragon a few times to the International Space Station to be captured and taken out by the robotic Canaveral. And then once that takes place, they'll go through the re-entry, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. Very, very fast, lots of plasma, lots of drag. Looks like a huge fireball coming through the sky, but it's perfectly okay. And then the crew will make it through into the thicker parts of the atmosphere. The vehicle will slow down, and they'll go through their parachute deploy sequence, which starts with some drogue shoots for a initial deceleration. And then they will further move on to 4 main parachutes, which will slow the capsule right down for a nice smooth splashdown in the ocean. And that is currently scheduled for 41 minutes past midnight local time in California, or 0841 UTC, which is going to be about a 10 and a half hour procedure from undocking from the space station all the way to touching down on Earth. And then it'll be a little while before the crew depart Dragon and depart the recovery ship on board the helicopter.
Exactly. And for all of these critical phases of flight, we will see them suited up. So they are currently in their suits right now for the undocking, and as they back away, then they have some time to suit down, to doff the suits, as it's called, and get some little breathing time inside their capsule before they have to resuit up for the actual splashdown and re-entry. So they're not stuck like this for the entire next 10 and a half hours at least. They'll have a little bit of break once they separate away. We should be coming up soon on a go, no-go poll to make sure that everyone is still go for undock. The last that we heard is that they are currently proceeding with plans for the undocking. And again, that procedure begins at about 5:15 Eastern time, so about 3 minutes from now, with the actual undocking occurring 20 minutes past the hour. Really quickly, let me thank Chromatic for gifting a Red Team membership, and Shazbert with a $5 super chat saying, safe travels to the Crew-11 astronauts on their journey back to Earth. Thank you, and of course that is what we are hoping for as well. You would also see there, as we were talking about earlier, the fact that there is the Space Station Control Center in Houston to the right. That is the control center located in Hawthorne, right in the middle of SpaceX headquarters inside Hawthorne, California. You can see one of the capsules they have on display in the back, and just to those right windows is part of their processing and manufacturing facility, where they actually build engines, where they build Falcon core stages. It's quite impressive that that's just stuck in the middle of everything there. And of course,
if I was on console, I'd almost get distracted by all of the wonderful things to look at. It's a good thing I'm not on console at SpaceX Mission Control right now, because I'd be very much focusing on all of the cool hardware in the factory and not on my job, which is monitoring my computer.
Exactly. And also of interesting note, NASA on the left side of the screen, the person talking to the crews up there is known as the Capcom, the capsule communicator. Meanwhile, the person that speaks to the crew over on the right side of your screen, over from SpaceX, they are known as the core, the crew operations and research, or no, I had it. Help me out.
Is it resource?
Resource engineer. Thank you. It took me a second there.
They should just call it Capcom. I don't know why they changed the name. Capcom does the job. It's historic. Everyone knows what Capcom is, right? They've been using that since the beginning of the space agency. Just call it Capcom. Why do you have to change the name SpaceX? I don't get it. But anyway.
Right. It's a bit weird that they used Capcom with Space Shuttle because it wasn't a capsule. But now that we have a capsule again, they don't call it Capcom because it stood for Capsule Communicator. I don't know. Well, I guess, I mean, they are an engineer in their own way, so there's that. This point, we should be getting close to that undocking procedure, and again, beginning with those first 12 hooks unlatching on board the ISS inside the pressurized mating adapter there. And we have confirmation that they are go for undocking. So that procedure should now be underway. So we were mentioning there is the International Docking Adapter, which is part of what's called a PMA, the Pressurized Mating Adapter. And so in there, that is when those latches should start releasing. And there are 12 of these hooks originally, and then that will be followed by the latches.
Complete and nominal.
There it is. That's what we like to hear. Everything nominal, and those hooks are indeed retracting. As mentioned, there are 12 of them. It takes about 5 minutes for this to fully unlatch all of those hooks and let things dampen out for a moment. And then...
Fingers crossed we do get those live views back. I believe we are expecting the live views for undocking, but it might come back. This might be one of those situations where the live views return like a few seconds before undocking, but fingers crossed they do come back in time.
Exactly. It's not a... I don't believe it's an actual requirement that they must be able to see everything.
Yeah.
But it certainly helps. And getting some information from Alex in the back channel, to be specific, they are 2 sets of hooks, of which there are 6 each. So it is 12 total, but it's 2 sets of 6. And hopefully we'll get views from there. Again, it's tough because there are... There we go.
There we go.
There is a view of Crew Dragon Endeavour with the 4 Crew-11 astronauts on board. That includes Zena Cardman, Mike Fink, Camilla Yui, and Oleg Platonov. And what we should see is once all of those are officially unlatched and it's sort of in that soft capture mode, then we will see that final first sort of thrust, kind of a burn zero, as it gets ready to move its way away from the International Space Station. This is also interesting because this has been the first time in the 25 years of the International Space Station that every single docking port aboard the ISS has been occupied at the exact same time, which is pretty cool. Between the Crew Dragon and the Cargo Dragon, between the Soyuz vehicles, you have Progress resupply vehicles, HTV-X, which is Japan's resupply vehicle. It's a busy time at the International Space Station.
We also had a Cygnus in there as well. Can't forget Cygnus.
Thank you for reminding me. And there we go. This is a view from one of the truss segments that holds all of those solar panels on the ISS. The first set of hooks are now open. And then the second set of hooks will now begin their unlatching. And I love how you could see in the bottom left the altitude and speed that we're used to seeing on a launch for the current speed and altitude of Crew Dragon. 26,429 kilometers an hour, 437 kilometers in altitude. And now...
And we should see those second set of 6 hooks opening up now, and we're about 1 minute and 15 seconds away from the scheduled time of the push back from Dragon.
You can see a bit of those hooks actually on that, it's a little faint because of the truss there, but the undocking from the undocking animation in the bottom right of the screen. So those final 6 ones should release, and then with that, Dragon will perform its burn, the first burn to back away from the ISS, which is basically just a small thrust. We had a short loss of signal there. This view looks like towards the pressurized mating adapter, but kind of hard to see the capsule actually attached to it. And these are all live videos, from the International Space Station as Crew-11 prepares to undock. The first time a crew has ever returned early from the International Space Station in its 25-year history because of medical reasons.
Should be about 10 seconds away now from that push from Dragon to officially separate the vehicles.
It may be tough to see. This is looking at the pressurized mating adapter.
All hooks open, nominal. SpaceX, all hooks open, nominal.
Undocking confirmed.
There we go.
There we go. Jinx. Crew Dragon Endeavour making its way back home.
Exactly. There are no actual springs that separate it apart, just those thrusters there. So that small push to get it moving away from the ISS, backing away. As we mentioned, there's sort of these imaginary ellipsoids that they have around the ISS that Dragon will be trying to get out of. So you have the keep out sphere, and you also have the approach ellipsoid that they need to work their way out of. The keep out sphere is the one that is closest inside the ISS's range. And then once it's outside of that, we will likely hear them disconnect from the big loop, as it's called, which is the joint communications that all vehicles have with the crew aboard the ISS when they're within this sphere. And that's when they're able to talk to each other on one loop. They will then separate back to their individual loops between the control center in Hawthorne for Dragon and then the ISS control center in Houston. Everything looking
looks
beautiful
like we're getting
so
it.
far.
Yeah, it looks like we're getting a little bit of a pitch over as expected for Dragon as it kind of reverses out, for lack of a better term, and gets away from the International Space Station under its 0th departure burn, technically.
Yep. And then looks like everything is starting to move away. This is the onboard view from onboard Crew Dragon, it looks like.
Looking back on the International Space Station, you can see the truss there at the bottom going along horizontally. It looks like we're going to get a wonderful view of the Russian orbital segment as Crew-11 departs. You can see there some of the solar panels and some of the radiators. It's huge radiators on board the International Space Station.
Yeah, that's those white accordion looking things. And this is a view over the shoulder of the crew members. Of course, you have the main people there. You've got Commander Zena Cardman and pilot Mike Fink taking a look at things there on those touchscreens.
They also have, I believe, that live view we were just looking at on their touchscreen of the space station, almost like a heads-up display, which is, yeah, well, they're not hand-flying Dragon. Dragon is going to be doing this autonomously, but, you know, it's still good to have a view nonetheless, because they can't exactly look out of those windows right now because their seats are rotated into their upright position, or kind of their flatter, closer to the screen position for maneuvers such as these, so they have easy access to all of their control interfaces.
Exactly. And it's not going to crash back to the ISS. This is just the angle of the camera kind of gives that illusion there. It is moving away from the station. Currently now looks like the undocking occurred right over Australia, as it's now working its way towards New Zealand and Antarctica. Yeah, you could see the view as well from that forward-facing camera inside the nose cone on each of Zena's and Mike's screens there. And again, the middle, you kind of see that trajectory of where it is in relation to the ISS, as well as what appears to be their checklist on the side as well as they continue. Also looks like they're taking a look at something on their tablet there too, that they also have. They have their
I
tablets
think Mike
attached to
Fink
their
might
legs.
have been taking some pictures with his iPad, maybe, because, yeah, I'm not sure what he would be taking pictures of, but that's definitely what he looked like, what it looked like he was doing. So maybe they've spotted something, I don't know.
Or just trying to get shots out the window as they're backing away. Some cool memories of, hey, this is what it looked like. There's another view from aboard the International Space Station. You could definitely tell that it's kind of going more on an upward trajectory away from the ISS from this view, as you see it backing away. Gorgeous lighting on it, too. Oh, they're taking selfies. That's what they're doing.
Wonderful.
You can see there, that is a camera facing Mike. And now it's facing forward.
He's turned it back round. It looks like he might be having some difficulties getting the camera app to work with his gloves on his spacesuit there, because of course the spacesuits, they have like the capacitive touch pads, so they can use touch screens and stuff. But he was definitely giving it a good prod to try and get the camera to flip around there.
It looked like Xena was using a stylus to then open the camera app on her tablet there as well. Gotta cut Mike some credit. He's 58 years old. He's been in multiple space flights going all the way back to the Space Shuttle program. So he's a great guy, though. So I joke, but he's actually an awesome human being. And again, see them backing away there. I do hope that we get to see some of those photos, though, from from his tablet there if they're not too personal. So coming up now on burn 1, we saw the initial burn 0 to kind of initiate that separation. This will increase the rate at which Crew Dragon Endeavour is separating away from the International Space Station, something they wait to do till they're a little further away, because obviously you don't want to be blasting the ISS with thrusters and with some of the nasty monopropellants that they use if you don't have to. And there we go. You can see those thrusters. If you look in the bottom right on the animation, you can see there. Everything looking good so far. You can see some of those thruster firings. If you look, those aren't just beams of light. And there we go. We'll still see some small corrections, of course.
And nominal. This time, you are go to dock suits per procedure 4.012. Reminder that ground will be deactivating the big loop following exit from the approach ellipsoid.
Hey, we are
Hi everybody, sorry for the technical difficulties there, having a little bit of problem on the back end, but we are continuing to track Dragon as it undocks from the International Space Station. We were just hearing there from Mission Control that departure burn 1 has successfully been completed. That 22-second burn continuing to increase the rate of which the Dragon is moving away from the space station. So it will now move further, even faster, and they Mission Control gave the crew on board permission to doff their spacesuits because they are now moving away from that period of where there's a higher risk. So they are now cleared to take off their spacesuits, be a little bit more comfortable inside Dragon as they prepare for the next 2 departure burns. That would be helpfully numbered departure burn 2 and departure burn 3. Actually, the 3rd and 4th departure burns, those will be coming up over the next kind of 90 minutes or so. So that's what we are currently expecting for the return of Crew-11. I believe we might have Sawyer back with us now as we get ready to get the show back on the road.
Yes, glad you can hear us all again. So right now, as we were talking about everything proceeding there, we should be getting outside of the keep out sphere and then next will be the approach ellipsoid. Once it's outside of that, as we've talked about, they will disconnect from the big loop, as it's called, which connects both the ISS and any visiting vehicles to it. They will then switch back to just communicating with the SpaceX mission control in Hawthorne. They will no longer be communicating with mission control, with the ISS mission control in Houston. ISS will go back to their own typical comm loops at that point. Right now, 3:41 a.m. Eastern Time is still the time that they are planning for re-entry and, for splashdown, re-entry occurring about 40 to 50 minutes prior to that. I got to thank some people here now that we're back and reconnected. Wanted to wait and make sure that we were all settled there first. Doug gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Patrick Bob coming in massively here with a $100 tip at tips.nasaspaceflight.com, saying keep up the awesome work and putting out very good content and information. Thank you, Patrick. We are honored to do it. Again, we are NSF. We are not NASA. We are not affiliated with NASA. We do use their initials with permission, but we are a group of space enthusiasts. And most importantly, as much as we like to have fun, we are journalists here who specifically cover the space program, all different aspects of it from all different sides. We try to be as neutral as possible and as open, as honest as possible with everything we do. And we thank you for joining us and for your support. And then Patrick also gifting 100 Red Team memberships. Unbelievable. Thank you. Those memberships allow us to be able to do what we do, to be able to partner with SEN, our ISS camera partner that we have aboard the ISS, that allow us to have views there, to have all of our teams just hours ago at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Kennedy Space Center area, bringing live launch coverage of all the Starlink launches, other amazing projects that are in work, the coverage that we have planned, of course, for Artemis 2. We wouldn't be able to do any of this, and of course, everything that happens over at Starbase without this amazing levels of support. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We are beyond appreciative.
100%. And that's 100 people now that have access to the membership area that maybe not necessarily would have been able to afford it before. So not only are you benefiting us, you're also helping out the community, because picture 100 people that those memberships have just been gifted to. So seriously, thank you so much for all of your support.
Exactly. And of course, Patrick, I saw that you were also having some health issues. We're glad you're here with us and wish you a speedy recovery as well. Bideford, good to see your name. The $30 super chat saying, looking good for separation. Yeah, that was indeed a beautiful separation. Again, it helps when you have that gorgeous lighting as it was flying over Australia there for the undocking of Crew-11. And Stevie with a £2 super chat saying, awesome stream, hoping for safe journey home. We absolutely are all hoping for that as well. And so, as mentioned, right now, they'll have some time to be able to sort of lounge around the capsule for a bit. I say lounge very loosely, but as mentioned, they will doff or remove their spacesuits and then be able to kind of have some snacks, hang around, relax, and everything before getting ready for that re-entry burn. And in fact, we were talking about the views from SEN. This is that view from SEN, our official ISS camera partner aboard the International Space Station. And awesome to see those views as well. We appreciate having that. And it's just absolutely gorgeous as you can see the Earth below. And crew in space, only about 10 more hours or so for them to enjoy these views before they end up off the coast of California. If all goes well, splashing down, again, the actual splashdown time at 3:41 a.m. Eastern Time, the official re-entry kind of procedure beginning about 45 or 50 minutes or so prior to that time. And of course, NSF will be live for splashdown coverage as well. You may want to stick for that because we may or may not be debuting a new voice to the channel. Not a new voice to the space community, but a new voice to the channel. So it's going to be exciting. sorry about that. I joked about a new voice coming in, and all of a sudden we go to no voices. So stick around for that coverage tonight. Our technology seems to be crashing on us at the moment. Thankfully, ours is not related to Crew Dragon and the ISS. So we are going to wrap things up here then, and make sure you are subscribed so you know when we go live for these. And if you haven't already, head on over to that Splashdown stream and hit the notification bell so you get a notification when we go live so you don't miss this crew's successful return. Ryan Caton, thank you for joining me for this undocking.
It is a pleasure as always, even if things don't always go 100% to plan on our end, but thank you for sticking with us, everybody. If you didn't already have enough deja vu from the Starlink launch earlier today with myself and Sawyer, you'll be getting it again with Sawyer on the Splashdown stream in a few hours' time. Obviously, we understand that's at a slightly less favourable time of day in terms of kind of the viewing times of our audience. So we do understand if you want to watch the replay instead tomorrow morning when you wake up. But we would really appreciate it if you are still awake and you're able to join us live for, fingers crossed, the successful return of Crew-11.
Exactly. And thank you to Jay Keegan for keeping us on the air as much as possible with all of these technical issues producing today's stream. Thank you very much, Jay. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today's undocking procedure here. And of course, we will rejoin you later tonight / early morning for Splashdown. A reminder, the Splashdown itself set for 3:41 a.m. Eastern Time. They do have that deorbit burn planned for about 45-50 minutes before that. So we will be with you to talk you through all of that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And here we go.
There's the deluge. Here's ignition.
Doubling up.
Did it just do a Kerbal?
Back to the moon and beyond.
Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, that sure looks like a perfect globe.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
We did have an observation.
Equalize.
343 unfolds to go.
It's orange.
Water towers, fly!
Bingo! Right in the center.
Where's Jacqueline? There it is! That was surreal.
That's not what we want to see.
No! Oh my God.
Yikes, you bet. We don't need any more of these.